Iowa 24, Kent State 14. Welcome to the Hawkeye podcast, instant reaction post-game podcast, saying podcast multiple times in a short amount of time. I'm John Miller. Good to have you along with us. Those of you watching live immediately following the game, or those of you listening in the podcast form, whether it be Spotify or Google Podcast or Apple Podcast or wherever, however it is that you're seeing and or hearing this, always appreciate you coming in. Oh boy, there for a second, I'm like, man, I was kind of joking last night when I did that late podcast impromptu when I said there's no way that Iowa will lose this game. I joked that I may have to delete that one. Well, didn't have to delete it. I still wouldn't have deleted it had Iowa lost the game. I would have left it up for another reminder of stupidity. And you do not approach sporting events with that level of hubris. You respect every single opponent. 24-14. Text line, pull that up here real quick so those of you watching it can see it. You can sign up for our free text line at 515-474-7216. You can join that and you can send your opinions on the game, or if you want me to comment on questions, comments, your opinions, etc., send it in. Just warning you, we got several, 600 people that are signed up for this, and there are usually about 75 to 100 questions that are submitted, so it's hard, next to impossible, to get to each and every one, but I appreciate each and every one of you. There are times during the course of the season, especially in Iowa football season, and let's keep it relative to the Iowa football program, turning off the Do Not Disturb. Just told my wife that I was going live, so please don't text me. And there's two more. Love her to death. I recall one time, and I'm going to cite the patron saint of, hey, just win baby games for Iowa football. It was in was it 2009 when an Iowa team needed to block 2 field goals at the end of the Northern Iowa game to get past UNI. That team went on to win an Orange Bowl. I remember other seasons in September where Iowa lost games to teams they shouldn't have lost to. MAC teams, Sun Belt teams, I think Sun Belt team. So Iowa emerges today with a win. They're 4-0. And there may be some texts in the chat, in the free text line that, this isn't the 5th ranked team. Maybe it's not the 5th ranked team in America. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not the 5th best. It's the 5th ranked team for sure. Maybe it's not the 5th best team today. Probably isn't the 5th best team in the country today. But when I look around the rest of the country, I look in the top 25 right now. Number 7, Texas A&M is down 20-10 to Arkansas with 3:17 to go in the 4th quarter. Looks like Iowa State, number 14, is going to fall 31-29 at Baylor. Looks like Clemson and North Carolina State, number 9th ranked Clemson, are going to overtime. Unranked NC State, 14-14. With 5:55 left to go in the 4th quarter, Auburn, number 23 Auburn, who just looked pretty darn good out of Happy Valley, is trailing Georgia State 24-19. Michigan held on against unranked Rutgers 20-13. Number 18 Wisconsin was beat 41-13 by Notre Dame, and I don't think Notre Dame's that good. So Alabama and Georgia are probably the best 2 teams in the sport, okay? Florida played Alabama really good last week, so I would say maybe they're a top 5 team. Frankly, when you look at their resume, maybe they are a top 5 team. Oregon's ranked 3rd. Oklahoma's ranked 4th. Oklahoma had struggled to put away Nebraska last week. So I don't know. Does it really matter right now? It doesn't. None of that's to say that there weren't some lingering concerning things from the game today. I'm not trying to put lipstick on the pig entirely, but I'm trying to say maybe it's not necessarily as much of a pig as you think that it is. We'll see later on in the year. We'll see. I think the offense took steps today. And if you'd listened to the last 2 podcasts I've done, the last 3 really, I was excited for these 2 weeks against Kent State and Colorado State. because the offense had opportunities to take steps. I'll know more about the offensive line when I watch the game again tomorrow. But, Connor Colby, true freshman, started the day at right guard. I think, and I said this on the show last night, that I wouldn't surprise me by the end of the year, he's a starting offensive lineman. Well, he started today. I think he's one of your best 5. Shooter got in more today. He's one of your best 5 once he's 100%. And Richmond is going to continue to play left tackle. There was some good from him today. There was some not good from him today, but I think the same could be said of everyone except Linderbaum. The right side, right tackle is probably where, the weakest link at this point in time. And that offensive line, I think, is going to continue to improve. Spencer Petras today, 15 of 23 for 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. That interception was bad. He had no business throwing that ball anywhere but the ground near the Tracy's feet. That was a bad throw. He'll see that. Maybe one instance where he should have thrown the ball away. And I was watching that. It was in the second half, maybe 2 instances, but one in the second half, maybe at the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, where he was running to his right. A defender came through the line unblocked. And I kind of don't know that if he had time to do it, but Spencer didn't have a clean sheet again today. But you know what? Iowa decided to attack vertically this game more than they have in any time this season. Specifically, a lot of that came in the second half. Obviously, first half, long touchdown pass to Keegan Johnson. His first ever reception, I think, as a Hawkeye, went for a 40-plus yard touchdown. But Iowa really, stretched and attacked vertically today, which is great to see. Iowa did many things today that they hadn't necessarily shown on film that's going to give Maryland and future opponents other little wrinkles and things to prepare for. So I think on the whole, Iowa averaged 5.1 yards per play, but really the second half of the fourth quarter, they were in lockbox mode. Not horrible at one point in time before they went into lockbox mode. I think, let me look how things were, see if I can see how things were through 3 quarters. Third quarter only through 3. Through 3 quarters, Iowa was averaging 6.4 yards per play. Fourth quarter only, they only averaged 2.1 yards per play. So that's why sometimes these statistics don't tell you everything. Last week I gave Petras a C. I'd give him a B- today. That's improvement from a C. I'd give the overall offense probably a C. I'd give the overall defense a B+. They gave up 14 points in the first half. They wound up giving up 14 points for the game. And they were out in the field a lot, 78 plays. Colorado State ran 78 plays to Iowa's 55. In the first half, I think Colorado State ran over 40 plays. Let me see if I can find how many they did in the first half. They ran 41 plays. So that's over 40. To Iowa's 24 in the first half. And Iowa averaged 7.5 yards per play on 24 plays. Colorado State was 11 of 23 on third downs. At one point in time, they were 9 of 13. So that means after that 9 of 13, they were just 2 of 10. That's a good way to end things. I was not concerned at halftime about the defense. Some people seem to be. But I knew that Phil was going to push the buttons, and he absolutely went and did and pushed the buttons. Iowa with 10 tackles for loss in this game. That's significant. That's a large number. 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. Let me pull these up so those of you that are here in the live cast watching this can actually see these things along with me here. Okay, we've got, there we go. You can see that now. Tyler Goodson, 18 attempts for 57 yards and a long of 27. That means he had 17 attempts for 30 yards, and he had 1 attempt for 27. Yeesh. Ed Podolak was saying during the broadcast in the first quarter, that Colorado State was coming out with odd man fronts, and Iowa was not expecting to see that from Colorado State because they hadn't shown that. And, excuse me, it's getting past my bedtime at 6 o'clock. Okay. They'd seen some odd man fronts the first 3 weeks, but it was kind of more of a 5-man odd man front where the first 3 weeks they were seeing some 3-4s. So, in Colorado State, once again, sold out. to stuff the box and stop the run. And Iowa averaged on the day, oh my gosh, 1.7 yards per rush. Is that right? 1.7 yards per rush. 32 attempts, 54 yards. Uh-oh. But you see what everyone's going to do. Not like this is a secret or anything. It's not like we just uncovered something today. Everyone is going to compress and stack the box and force Spencer Petras to beat them over the top consistently. I mean, I don't know that there's a scenario, if I was a defensive coordinator, that I would stop loading the box against Iowa unless Petras beat me three times, maybe three times for sure, on touchdown producing over the top plays. Touchdown producing. Because just because you get hit a 40-yarder over the top and now you've got 1st and 10 on my 25, it doesn't mean Iowa's going to score a touchdown. Iowa still has to play offense, and it's not something they're worse than average on. Okay. So but it's not like I haven't been saying this dating back to my days with Zabel on Sound Off, or even before then on the Golden Harvest Hawkeye Huddle back on 600 WMT in Eastern Iowa, or KXIC way back in the early 2000s when I was just some snot-nosed guy that Marc Allen invited me to come on the show there at KXIC. Been saying it forever that Iowa invites more stacked boxes than anybody that I know, because they are not a consistent threat to beat you in the vertical passing game. In 2002, they were. And that's why that team is the gold standard for me, at least since 85. But I think the 2002 Iowa team was better than the 85 team. I do. But there hasn't been many lineups that Iowa could put on the field like that. That 2002 team had the best offensive line in school history, one of the top 2 or 3 tight ends in school history, had C.J. Jones and Mo Brown. It had Fred Russell, and it had a great defense, phenomenal defense. So, yeah, if you didn't load the box on that team, you were dead. You were dead. But turned out you were pretty much dead anyway. Well, that 2002 Iowa team scored what? Was it 23 points on Miami of Ohio at Miami of Ohio or something like that? Under 30 for sure. Iowa scoring 24 today snaps their streak. I think it was at 9 consecutive games where they scored at least 25 points, which is a bit of a misleading stat anyway, which I think might have been a school record or one of the longest streaks in school history. Bit of a misleading stat too, because the defense had scored quite a few points, and the defense setting Iowa up today again with a very short field off a turnover off of a fumble and fumble recovery. But it wasn't a great game. It wasn't one that, I mean, I'll watch it again because it's what I do, but I'm not necessarily looking forward to it. But it doesn't mean, they're going to get killed next week against Maryland. Oh, by the way, let's pull that one up. Okay. Those of you that are here and watching this, you'll see my screen. But Maryland played Kent State today, who Iowa played last week. And Maryland beat them 37-16. It was 24-9 at halftime. Tagovailoa, 31 of 41 for 384 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. That's Dante Demas, 4 receptions, 108 yards. Definitely watch out for this guy. But look at the number of receivers that had at least 3 receptions for Maryland. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 different, pass catchers, if you will, caught at least 3 passes. Maryland's going to throw the ball around. So Brock Purdy is an experienced quarterback who Iowa made him look bad. Is Tagovailoa going to be the most dangerous quarterback that Iowa has faced this year? Possibly, but maybe the Iowa defense makes quarterbacks look bad. I think it's going to take at least 24 from Iowa's offense next week to win that game. But Maryland last week against Illinois, I think, scored 20. So it's not like I'm saying Maryland is a powerhouse, but this is a common opponent. Kent State had 28 first downs. That's a lot. Kent State had 458 yards against Maryland. And they were +1 in turnovers. They had a time of possession advantage. Actually, this doesn't look right because those 2 numbers shouldn't add up. That number is probably one of these numbers is wrong. But anyway, But they had 9 penalties. So did Maryland. So I think Iowa should beat Maryland. But they're going to need to bring a better game, a more concerted effort than they brought in this game. And I don't know what it was for Iowa in the first half. Who knows? Maybe they didn't get out there with their focus and their A-game mentality against a team that they knew they were much better than. But I tweeted before halftime that, hey, you know what? I wish Iowa were up 30-0 here, but there's going to be some paint peeling going on in that halftime locker room. And maybe that's good medicine. Maybe that's not a bad thing. It's always a great thing if you're a coach, if you can get teaching opportunities and object lessons to illustrate to your team in wins. That's gold. That is absolute gold. You don't want it to happen you don't want to lose to a MAC team or a Sun Belt team or a Mountain West team in September to have to learn a lesson. That's bad. And Iowa has done that before. But folks, for a program that has frequently, more than they should, let's say that, because frequently is a subjective term, more than they should, for a program that's stubbed their toe in September, more than they should when we see where they end up in a season. This team is 4-0 in September. I don't know how many of you had them pegged for 4-0. And today's the 25th. That means that when they play Maryland next week, it's October. So I didn't have them 4-0. I thought there was a higher possibility of being 2-2 than 4-0. But they're 4-0. And deservedly or not, they're ranked in the top 5. Do they fall out of the top 5 next week? Maybe. Who cares? Who cares? Because here's the deal. If they beat Maryland next week and then they beat Penn State the week after that at home, their ranking will be what it deserves to be. If they'd be still top 5 at then, and they probably would deserve to be top 5. Iowa's still going to have to win. In my opinion, Iowa is still going to have to win in Madison in order to make it to the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. If they don't win in Madison, I don't think that they make it to the Big Ten championship game in Madison. I'm going to stop screen sharing here for those of you that are watching this. I do want to go over to Wisconsin's schedule real quick, just so that you understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. So Wisconsin hosts Michigan this next week. Now, if they lose that game, if they lose to Michigan, let me pull this up for those of you watching. If they lose to Michigan next week, then Iowa doesn't have to win in Madison in order to go to Indianapolis. So let's say that Wisconsin loses against Michigan and Iowa goes 8-1 and Iowa's only loss in Big Ten play is at Wisconsin. Iowa will go to Indianapolis, guaranteed. Okay. But after Michigan, if Wisconsin gets by Michigan at home, they're at Illinois, they're at Purdue, they're home against Iowa, they're at Rutgers, they're home against Northwestern, they're home against Nebraska, and they're at Minnesota. And as below average as Wisconsin quarterback Graham Mertz has looked this year, and he has, by the way, there's not a lot of Big Ten quarterbacks out there that look great. And I'm watching something right now, and I'm seeing Nebraska quarterback Taylor Martinez on his back and injured on the field. Don't really know anything more than that. The TV is about 30 feet away from me. There's not a lot of great quarterback play in the Big Ten this year. That's why I'm wondering if Tagovailoa might be the best one that Iowa sees the rest of the way. It's not a great quarterback league this year. So if Wisconsin can get past Michigan next week, then I kind of think Iowa has to win in Madison, because I don't know that I see Wisconsin slipping up even as average or below average as their offense is right now. Does that ring a bell, though? Does that ring a bell? Does below average offense ring a bell? It should, because that's what Iowa has. Iowa has a below average offense. And during the game today, at halftime, actually, I went and dug up some statistics. And some of you listening to and watching this might not be old enough to remember the 2002 Ohio State Buckeyes, aka the Luckeyes. Iowa was having its best season in a long time. Iowa went 8-0 in Big Ten play. Ohio State went 8-0 in Big Ten play. Iowa finished the regular season with one loss to Iowa State. Ohio State was undefeated. They went on and played Miami for the national championship, and they won that game. For those of you that are old enough, you remember who their quarterback was. His name was Craig Krenzel. For those of you who weren't old enough, he was not a difference maker at quarterback. He was a game manager. Matter of fact, that might have been around the time the term game manager even came into the lexicon of football fans. He wasn't great. He was average. His completion percentage in 2002, he was 148 of 249, 59.4%, 12 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and a rating of 140.9. My guess is that Petrus is near that. Now, he did have an average yards per attempt that year of 8.2. But their offense, Ohio State's offense that year ranked nationally, their passing offense was 92nd in the country. 92nd. Not good. Their total offense rank was 70, which was even less than middle of the pack than 70 would be right now, because there's 130 Division I teams. And in 2002, there were 117 Division I teams. So 70 out of 117 is worse than 70 out of 130 from a percentage. So their total offense was not good. I've been saying since the preseason, all Iowa's offense needs to be, well, okay, I'll take that back. I've been saying it since after the Iowa State game because I had concerns with Iowa's defensive line before the season. So the last 2 weeks, I've been saying that all Iowa's offense needs to be is average. If they have an average offense, an offense that can get to being average, which they're not there yet. If they have an offense that can get to be average, they will win, I think, the Big Ten West, and I think they can win the Big Ten championship and play in a New Year's Six bowl, possibly even in the college football playoff. I don't think so. And if they don't, it's not going to ruin my year. But that's all they need. I would be hard-pressed to find another team in the country that has better special teams play than Iowa. Tory Taylor might have lost the punting battle today, and that might be the only time we say that all season since Iowa's not playing against Rutgers. But when you talk about Iowa's specialists, Taylor, Shudak, Charlie Jones, who I think Charlie Jones is the best Iowa punt returner since Tim Dwight. Matter of fact, I think better than Desmond King. Yes, I do believe that. I think he's sneaky fast. He has unexpected acceleration. And he has these little jitter moves that he just makes and gets skinny that are so effective. Start-stops. I think he's the best punt returner Iowa's had since Tim Dwight. And you can fight me on that. So really, Spencer Petras doesn't need to become Brad Banks. He doesn't need to become 2010 Ricky Stanzi, because 2009 Ricky Stanzi, by the way, that 2009 team coming up again, 2009 Ricky Stanzi, I think Stanzi might have had 15 touchdown passes to 17 interceptions. I gotta look to see if my my memory is not failing me here. 2009 Iowa, I'm sorry, had them backwards. 17 touchdowns to 15 interceptions. That was Pick Rick that year. And his completion percentage was 56.3. Worse than Krenzel's. Petras doesn't need to be a hero. He doesn't need to be what C.J. Beathard was to the 2015 team. He doesn't need to be what Drew Tate was to the 2014. He just needs to be Craig Krenzel. That's all. Can a brother get a little Craig Krenzel? That's all I'm looking for. Just get to average. Just get to average. And in the second half of today's games, ladies and gentlemen, easy for me to say, I think Petrus was that. I think he had an average to marginally above average performance in the second half. Iowa was 8 of 13 passing for 1 touchdown in the second half. And that went for 102 yards. And yards per attempt, 102 divided by 13, 7.8. That's all we need, folks. I'm telling you, that's all they need to probably win the Big Ten West. That's all that they need. They need second half Petrus. Actually, second quarter on, except for the tunnel screen interception. That's it. That's it. If I had an opportunity to sit down and speak with him, I would say, Spencer, all we need you to be is the guy who played like he did at second half against Colorado State. And none of us is going to write a book about the way that he just played. None of us may ever even remember that in 4 years from now, because it's relatively nondescript relative to the annals of Iowa football history. It's just competent. It's just competent. But all of that isn't on Spencer, because the offensive line also played more competently in the second half than they did in the first half. It's not all on Petrus. Yes, we can see the things that he struggles with and he continues to struggle with, and that's frustrating. But man, it ain't all on him. It's not all on him. And like I've been saying since last year with Petrus, that touchdown pass he threw to Keegan Johnson, I knew that it had a chance to be a big play the second it left his hand, because he did that little hop right before he plants his back foot. He has a good base and foundation under him, and then he had touch. I'm like, well, that is perfect textbook form. Probably is going to be a big play. And it was. Same thing when he threw the ball to Keegan earlier or later in the game. Same thing on another play that he threw to Charlie along the right sideline late in the game, the shot they took. Beautiful throw. You can tell it when he gets his fundamentals down. So those are things that he can control. Consistency with the fundamentals. But Dave Laughlin just said, down goes Clemson. Torque Mason said Petrus just needs to be Nate Chandler. I think that I did bring that up a couple of weeks ago. Just be Nate. That's it, man. I mean, Torque, I know you love stats too. Nathan Chandler. Let's look at Big Nate's statistics. In 2003, phenomenal defense again, ladies and gentlemen. Phenomenal specialists. I mean, Ramon Ochoa, maybe you know Charlie Jones is a punt returner, kick returner, but the Razor. I think the Razor might have set Iowa's season record for punt return yards in 2003. I think the memories, I think like 405 yards. I might have looked that up at halftime. Nathan Chandler had 18 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. He completed 53.7% of his passes, and it was 6.6 yards per attempt. That ain't great, folks. That is not great. That is not gonna get it done for you. But I mean, that's all really Petrus likely needs to be. That 2003 offensive line was better than this. Okay. Petrus this year through 3 games is averaging 5.5 yards per attempt. That's going to go up after today. Last year it was 6.4. That's Chandler. It's a 9 to 5 touchdown interception ratio. That's exactly Chandler. Okay. Well, not exactly, because that was in 8 games and Chandler was in 10, but it's in the ballpark. 57.1% completion percentage last year. I said Chandler had 53. He's at 58.3. So again, folks, we're seeing just average. Just be Nate Chandler. Just be Craig Krenzel. So I have yapped a lot, and I am going to go to the questions app. I thought for a second I might have sent this out in my work account, and that was going to be slightly embarrassing and bad, but I didn't do that, thankfully, because I have a text group for my work as well. Messages, here we go. Let me scroll down here to, holy cow, thank you so much. This is insane how many questions have been submitted. I like to go down to the first people that got in. Jordan Brenner said, was Laporta's celebration the most docile ever to receive an unsportsmanlike penalty for spinning the ball? Yeah, that was bad. That was bad. Tim McLaughlin says, is Brian Ferentz still a bit Jekyll and Hyde calling plays? The screenplay in the red zone was unnecessary, but the Tracy reverse play call and design was absolutely outstanding. I think that a lot of play callers, if you want to call it Jekyll and Hyde or whatever, I think a lot of play callers, probably the fan bases, because just think about this. We watch Iowa football more than we watch other teams. Okay. Maybe you have an NFL team, so you're familiar with your NFL coordinator. But we watch all these things. So we're more sensitive to it than not. I thought Brian called a good game today. Can you see the stinkers when they happen? Yeah. I mean, that tunnel script. Honestly, I think the call was questionable because of how Kent State was playing, how close they were playing, how aggressive they were with their corners. So that's why I don't know that today was the right place for it. But Petrus still should have, thrown that ball in the ground. But I thought Brian did a really good job. Matt Dingman says, John, why can't they win by more points? It doesn't matter how many points you win by. Again, the 2002 Ohio State Buckeyes. They called them the Ohio State Buckeyes for a reason. Damn it, I keep having to Google today while I'm doing this. Ohio State football historical scores. I mean, I've got so many little websites I go to, folks. Some of these I keep in my pocket because I like having a little competitive advantage. All right, the 2002 Buckeyes beat Michigan the last game of the regular season 14-9. They beat a 5-7 Illinois team 23-16. These are let me go back to chronological order. I'll start from the beginning of the season and work down. They beat Cincinnati at home, or at Cincinnati rather, 23-19. I think it might be is that the last time they played in Cincinnati? Maybe not. Then they smoked Indiana. They beat Northwestern, a 3-9 Northwestern team, 27-16. They beat an 8-6 Wisconsin team, 19-14. They beat a 9-4 Penn State team, 13-17. Then they smoked Minnesota. They beat a 7-6 Purdue team, 10-6. They beat a 5-7 Illinois team, 23-16. They beat a 10-3 Michigan team, 14-9. And they beat Miami in the national championship game, and they won them all. Doesn't really matter how much you win by. If Iowa wins the rest of its game by an average combined score of 3 points, they will be in the college football playoff. Matt Hansen at 525, and before I even brought up 2002 Ohio State at any point in time, the game was still going on. I threw this text out and said, hey, if you want to get in, shoot me a note. Mike Hansen from Alabama says, is this Iowa like 2002 Ohio State? See? Not crazy up here. Mike just proved that I'm not crazy, right? Or maybe Mike and I are both. Zach Cosgrove says, is a W, or is there cause for concern? Yes and yes. There's plenty of causes for concern. We all see what they are. It's more than just the quarterback. But yes, a win is also a win. In a win like this, you can learn so much. The coaches will have their attention this week. It's also a short week of practice. Also a very short week of practice. So, and I think Kirk somewhere said that this was one of their best weeks of offensive practice. And they got going in the second half. They started stretching the field. So I think there's some things to be encouraged by as well. Don't necessarily focus on the score. Could Iowa put another touchdown on the board at the end? Yes, they could have. They didn't. Part of me wishes they could have, because 30, we all know 31-14 looks better than 24-14. As stupid as all that is. James McCreevy says, how good is the Jack Campbell? How good is the Matt Campbell and Justin Jenkins duo? Great duo. That is a shot at Tim Brando and the broadcast team. Brando might be the worst out there. Might be the worst. Save me your Beth Mowins. Beth Mowins is a competent broadcaster, in my opinion. She doesn't make mistakes like that as frequent. We all make mistakes, but this is your job, man. You can't be that bad, and he was bad. Bill Kuehler pointed out offensive line was having some big problems, and they were. Is it fair to assume and expect the offensive line that has 5 guys on it, sometimes 6 with an inline tight end, sometimes 7 with 2 tights? Is it fair to expect them to consistently win the battles against an overmanned front? If they've got 5, the other guys have 7. If they got 6 up there, the other guys have 8 in the box. It's hard. That's why taking those shots down the field is definitely going to pay dividends for Iowa as the season goes along. Iowa just emailed me the season stats. I want to go here and look at Petrus's stats real quick, as we were just talking about that. Petrus is now hitting on 59.8% of his passes. What did we say Chandler was? Around 53.7%. And Craig Krenzel was around 58, 59%. Does it have his rating? No, doesn't have his rating on there. His efficiency is 124, but 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. Again, I think that if those stats came with more stretching the field mixed in, that would be much better. Like we said today, the second half version. So let's go per yards per attempt now. Divided by 107, 6.3. Getting up there, getting closer to average, folks. That's all we need, I'm telling you. Connor Blythe, we really need to let Petrus throw deep more. If you watch his highlight tape, it's a ton of deep balls on the money. Love seeing that today. Will help unload the box. You're absolutely right. It will help unload the box. Cody DeWart says, did Iowa play worse than they should have today, or did Colorado State play better than anticipated? I think Colorado State definitely played better than anticipated. And I think sometimes folks, comparing scores and the transitive properties and saying, well, this team won by this against this team, so this is better. Like Kent State put up a lot of yards against Maryland. Maryland beat Kent State by more points. But like if we go back through the Iowa-Kent State game, we talk about IKM fumbled on the Kent State side of the field. Iowa had a drop pass on a drive that would have been 1st and 10 on the Kent State side of the field. Tyrone Tracy slipped and fell. Otherwise, that would have been another 1st and 10 on the Kent State side of the field. Okay. So, but also stylistically, some fits are better fits for some teams to score more points and gain more yards than other. I mean, Kent State had 28 first downs against Maryland today. I don't think Maryland's going to throw for nearly 400 yards next week against Iowa. I'll be surprised if Tagovailoa throws for over 250, and if he does, I suspect it will be because they can't run it and they're limited to throwing, and that likely leads to more interceptions. Sometimes it's about matchups. Today was a little concerning because that's a physical team, a team that likes to play physical, and Wisconsin likes to play physical too. I think Iowa-Wisconsin, first 1-13 wins the game. Jennifer Hendrickson says, did the run game struggle today because they were stacking the box heavily, or is O-line just not getting a good push? I think it's a mix of 2 things. I think that the box stacking, absolutely. And I also think that the offensive line is not there yet. I think they will get there. They're not there yet, but they just got through September 4-0. Iowa's offensive lines are rarely there yet at the end of September. They rarely are. It's usually from about the middle of October on, they start to get their groove. And I think that they're on pace. We'll see. But it's never fast enough, right? John Singer says, what was the biggest difference for the defense between the first and second half? Also, was the offensive play calling the second half the real Iowa or an apparition? It better become more the real Iowa. It has to be. It has to be to free things up in the running game. And the biggest difference between the first half and second half of the defense, I don't know. I'd have to watch it again. But they certainly seem like they came out and they played with more of an aggressive edge. I think they got their asses chewed by Parker at halftime. And they came out. Chris Burns says, why did Scott Stapleton get married the weekend of an Iowa home game? Horrible. Scott, you got to do better than that, Mr. Stapleton. You have to do better than that. You're making concessions like this before you're even married. What's it going to look like in 10 years? Sorry, I take that back. Concession and compromise, absolute keys to a good marriage. Take it from someone who's bad at both and who's had to work at it really, really hard. Michael Tretton says, CSU offensive success on third down. Talked about that. Second half, they at one point they were 9 of 13 and they finished the game 11 of 23 or something like that. So Iowa went like 2 and they were 2 and 11 down the stretch. My math's off. I already talked about that. Brian Stewart, frustrating first half, but just can't stand the booing of the guys as they go off the field. We're better than that. Earlier on in my career, on Sound Off, man. I used to go off at Iowa fans for this booing because people would call in and they'd say, "We weren't booing the player, we were booing the coach." And my problem with booing, you can't boo intentionally, you can't boo directionally. Players hear the boos. Do you think Spencer Petras is like, "Oh, they're not booing me, they're booing Kirk"? So I'm not a fan of booing. I think it's low class. If you pay for a ticket, and you want to go and you boo, I also am not big into telling people what they should or shouldn't do in situations like that. But even though I'm saying that you have every right to boo, I still think you're low class if you do that. So how's that for an answer? Some Laporta things. Dan Bloomberg says, I ask this every week, why the devotion to Petras? And I'm sure Dan is talking about Kirk's continuing to play him without a look at Alex Padilla. I've been doing this in some way, shape, or form since 1999. I have been, I've seen every game of the Ferentz era. I've read, listened to, or been at a combination, mostly the first two. Every single Kirk Ferentz press conference since he's been at Iowa. I've had, I don't know, 2 or 3 dozen personal encounters with Kirk, many times in a green room at an event that I was an MC for at a, some Iowa club speaking event in the Summer Rubber Chicken Tour circuit that I was invited to be a part of. And, it'd be like, so you guys have been to those, right? Where there's a coach from football, basketball, wrestling, typically. And before those events are going on, they do some glad handling, but there's like a green room back in the back of a room where you just kind of hang out in until you go out and speak. And I'd get a chance to be back in though. That was the best part of it always for me. It wasn't getting up and speaking and things like that. It was just getting a chance to hang out with Kirk and Tom Brands and I was going to say Todd Licklider, and then I was going to say Steve Alford, Tom Brands and Kirk, Lisa Bluter. That was the best part of it. So, I mean, I feel like I've got a decent read on Kirk Ferentz. I fully believe that at this stage of his career, the best quarterback who's been the most consistent in practice is playing quarterback for Iowa. I believe it's Petras. In 2014, I think that you had C.J. Beathard, who could do things in practice that Jake Rudock couldn't do. But I think it's very common for the backup quarterback in practice to try to do too much in order to catch the attention of the coaches. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Every day, it's like a job audition. You're trying to get their eye. And if you're just Johnny Checkdown, running the scout team or running second team reps, nobody's interested in Johnny Checkdown. So you take more chances. And when you take more chances, you make more mistakes. So that is definitely one of the advantages of being the incumbent. I think that Kirk believes that Petras gives them the best chance to be successful right now. But I believe that if it were even close at this stage of Kirk's career, where I don't know that he gives as many Fs as he once did, or at least puts off the impression that he does, I believe he'd make a change. I do. He did make the change in 2015. Kirk made a big change in the way he ran the operation from 2014 to 2015. Big change. 2014 was an incredibly difficult year for the Ferentzes. Brian lost a child. Kirk lost a grandchild. Kirk was very testy that year. That was also the year that I was a big douchebag. Not that had any bearing on Kirk. Just makes me feel bad about it still to this day because of all the things that Kirk was going through that I had no idea, and his family. And that was when Kirk hired an outside consulting firm to help him with media relations because it was testy between Kirk and the media. And that was also when Kirk made the decision in January, to hold a press conference and release a 2-deep in January. He'd never done that before. in previous 14, 15, 16 years as Iowa's head coach. And he came out and said that C.J. Beathard's number one on the depth chart, knowing that full well that Jake Rudock would transfer, which he did. Because he just felt that C.J. was the best guy to give them the chance to be the best that they could be. I think Kirk's even more that way now. I don't believe there would be a Christensen Stanzi 2008 again in Kirk's tenure. But I understand that many of you will say, well, John, he did it in 2008 with Jake and Ricky Stanzi. Right. 2008 was 13 years ago. What were you doing 13 years ago? I know what I was doing 13 years ago. I was 37, for crying out loud. We change. And Kirk is in his mid to upper 60s now. Next year's Iowa football team is probably going to be really good. Preseason top 10 type good. Okay. He knows the clock is ticking. He knows there's only so many years left ahead of him as a head football coach. So I don't think Kirk's not playing the guy that he believes gives him and his team the best chance to win. I could be wrong. But if I were, I don't think this team would have the chemistry that it looks like they have. Okay. And I still do know some people on the inside. Let's just leave it at that. And I have not heard from anyone that Padilla is clearly the man in practice. I don't even need to bring Deuce into this because he's not there yet. Could see it clearly from the 2 open practices, nowhere near. Doesn't mean he won't be next year or the year after that. But I'm not hearing anything that leads me to believe that anyone's seriously pushing Petrus. So Petrus is your guy. So you can do one of two things. You can either sit back, not saying you don't get frustrated, but sit back and realize that this is what it is and just hope that he continues to make some improvements and gets to become average. Or you could make this a miserable season for yourself and likely those around you by complaining about it all the time. So it's up to you, really. But it's your decision. I'm not telling you what to do. Cade Walls says Van Ness is going to be a problem for Big Ten offenses for a while. What? I mean, you guys have heard me call this defense the no-name defense for a while, and it's a term of endearment. I don't know where these guys all came from, out of nowhere. Defensively, obviously, Jack Campbell today with 18 tackles, seven solos, 2 pass breakups. But Van Ness, man, another sack today, another tackle for loss today. Van Valkenburg, 2.5 sacks. I got to pull up these season stats for Iowa's defense. Sacks. Van Ness with 4. Van Ness with 4 sacks. Van Valkenburg, it says 1.5. How is that possible when the stats today were saying that he had – that was 2.5 tackles for loss. I'm sorry. So Van Ness is really hitting it. Leads Iowa with 4.5 sacks. Van Valkenburg has 4 sacks. Dane Belton with 2.5. Wagner with 3.5, a guy that a lot of people gave up on. Joe Evans with 3. This team has 28. No, gosh. You know what? Fire me. All right. I'm reading tackles for loss again. Let me get to sacks. Van Ness with 4. Evans with 3. Wagner with 2. Van Valkenburg with 1.5. This team now has 13 sacks through 4 games. That is pace for 39. Scott Docterman of The Athletic has a stat that in years where Iowa wins 9 or 10 or 11 games or 12, they have at least 30 sacks. In the years where they win 6, 7, or 8, they don't have that many. So I did not expect this team to get anywhere near that. They are on pace to blow it out of the water. So kudos to them. Zach Young, running game. Can they move the ball in the Big Ten? Not if they don't stretch the field vertically. They're going to struggle. I mean, today, the biggest concern today is less than 60 yards rushing against Colorado State. That's a concern. Matt Dolman, Charlie Jones, the best Iowa punt returner since Tim Dwight. Tom Ashmore says, Spencer seems like he's predetermined where he's going before he breaks the huddle. Diamond formation only looks at Goodson, looser. He still locks in. There's no doubt. But there were some times today and plays today that he did go through his progressions. That's progress. It needs to happen more consistently than he does, but he does make pre-snap reads, in my opinion. I love today, though. I don't mind a pre-snap read where he looks and he sees that it's one-on-one coverage. At least that's what the defense is showing. But then you got to take the snap And when you take the snap, you got to keep your eyes on that real quick, sneak a little glance to make sure that it wasn't just a man-on-man look pre-snap and then the safety rolls over after the snap to confuse you. If you continue to see that it's one-on-one, attack it. That's your predetermined read, so go get it. Go attack a mismatch. That's different than just like, okay, I'm going to throw it to this tight end on this play no matter what. Let me scroll here. I mean, we're still only to 5:27 submissions, 5:27 p.m. For the podcast, I'm going to take these pauses out. So sorry, those of you watching this live. And some of these that I'm scrolling past, I'm not even looking at the person's name that submitted it. I'm just reading the question, and many of these we've already sort of talked about. Chase Gunderson says, will we drop in the rankings after this pretty poor showing at home? If so, how far? I don't know. Does it matter? I mean, I know it matters. Listen, I'm a fan too. And I would rather Iowa continue to be ranked 5th than not. But sounds like somebody said Clemson lost today in the chat. Dave Laughlin said down goes Clemson. So I think, did Texas A&M, did they also lose today to Arkansas? So, and they weren't ranked ahead of Iowa. I just don't know who is Arkansas going to go from like 16th or 17th ahead of Iowa. NC State isn't. I think maybe 5th or 6th. So, but again, win your next 2 games and it's just going to take care of himself. John Default says the formula default maybe. The formula to beat Iowa is to load the box and make Spencer throw. Thoughts on why we don't throw more on first down? Well, that's the formula to try and beat Iowa. Thus far this season, that strategy is 0 for 4, as every one of Iowa's opponents has tried that. That's the formula to try and beat Iowa every year. So some years it works better than others. Some games it works better than others. Iowa on first down, you're saying thoughts on why Iowa doesn't throw the ball more on first down. Iowa ran 25 first down plays today. They threw the ball 8 times and they ran it 25 times. I think that they have been throwing it more on first down prior to this game, but this game was first down run heavy. Griffin Johnson says, why haven't we seen the Wildcat at all? Well, we've seen it 3 or 4 times this year, and maybe actually more than that. This was the first game where I don't think we saw it. I think that how Iowa was using it is it's the Wildcat just in name only. Because what Iowa doesn't have they haven't shown any passing threat out of it. I think Goodson needs to do the zone read give more when they run it, to respect the zone read and not just look at the Wildcat as some type of single wing that the quarterback, being Goodson in this case, is just going to run the ball and the other guys in the backfield are nothing more than glorified blockers. It's not fooling anybody. So when you put that in, it actually makes Iowa, thus far, with what we've seen on film, more predictable. Perhaps, crazy like a fox. And these coaches are smart guys. Perhaps they're saving the wrinkles out of it for a situation like they really need to play against Penn State in a couple of weeks. So we'll see. Aaron Kilberg says, does Tyler Goodson need to start hitting the hole harder? Seems like he's been dancing more, resulting in a lot of negative plays. I think that Tyler Goodson looks up and he sees a number of defenders running at him because there are more defenders than there are blockers. I do think that there's some instances where the greater strategy is just to get north-south, put your head down, hit a hole, maybe get 2 yards and not a 0-yard play. So I'm not saying there isn't merit to what you're saying, but I also think that he's having a tough time. Brody Harm says, DL is much better and deeper than anticipated. OL still a work in progress. Agreed. Matt Van Hulven, scale of 1 to 10, how dumb would it be to ask if we want Bama? 11? Correct. That is turned all the way up to 11. We don't want Bama. Michigan State just over the top, man. They're a pretty salty looking team. Joseph Schricker, win's a win, but Iowa clearly isn't a top 5 team. We're going to struggle against a lot of Big Ten teams. Iowa State's losing right now. Maryland's destroying Kent State. Iowa looks like a 9-3, 8-4 team right now. I hope I'm wrong. Historically, 8-4, 9-3 for Iowa's good season. A. B. Again, Who's the top 5? Who's your top 5? Who's your number 6? Who's your number 7? Iowa's in the top 10 discussion based upon what they've done, right? And if I'd have told you before the season that I was in the top 10 through 4 games, you'd have said, take it. So it's the polls that really start to count is when the college football playoff polls come out and what your record is about that time. And if you're in the discussion at that time, we'll see. Paul Heimer says, when we get to Big Ten play, it's all going to be tough, but there isn't a team that scares me. Play to win the game, not play to lose, which goes against what we do generally. I think that you're right. I don't think that there's any team in Iowa's schedule that scares me, and they can beat them all. I think many of them could beat Iowa if Iowa doesn't bring its edge like they brought in the second half. And I think that's why I think today's game is invaluable. Every time Kirk suits up against a team this year where he's playing against Illinois or Northwestern, who hasn't looked very good. Minnesota lost to Bowling Green today. Say, hey, guys, you think you're better than these guys? You remember Colorado State? I kind of sounds like a combination of Tyler Kluver's impersonation of Kirk Ferentz and also Andy Kaufman's alter ego. What is that guy's name? What is the guy that Andy Kaufman would play? Bob Zamuta's character, right? Don't remember it. Sorry. Anyhow, you know what I'm talking about. If you're an Andy Kaufman fan, I am. Apparently not a big one because I can't remember the guy's name, the character. Going through questions again. Ooh, this is a good one from Alex Dean. Is the new offensive line coach affecting the development sync of his position group? How much money for Tim Polasek to come back? Tim Polasek was a very well-liked coach. He was fire and vinegar on his coaching style. You would not want to have virgin ears around Tim, but he was really well-liked. It's a really good point that I hadn't thought about. I don't have the answer to that. From what I hear from the people that I know, I haven't heard any negative things about the guy yet. So I would say interesting angle, but not sure that I have an answer for you. Alex also brought up Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce. And those two guys, Bruce today had, where's he at? Bruce. He had some targets, but I don't think he had a catch. He had a run. And again, we know that Keegan Johnson had 2 catches on 3 targets, a 49-yarder. His long was 49. His long was 49. His average was 46, which means that the other one, I'm not doing math. That's why I got a communications degree, because they said you don't have to do math. So yeah, it's really exciting to see those two. Tyrone Tracy today, 2 targets. Listen, get the best people the ball. I'm not saying that Tracy isn't one of the best, but Bruce and Johnson, they're players. This is also game 4, by the way. A lot of these younger players, game 4 games in, redshirt decisions after this one if they've all played in 4 games. I don't think Bruce and Johnson are redshirting. They're in the Army now, as Kirk likes to say. Michael Rovner, the obvious is what's up with a penalty in the end zone just for spinning the ball. Yeah, that sucks. It sucks even more when you then are penalized 15 yards and you kick the ball out of bounds and the other coach gets an opportunity to take a penalty 15 yards from the spot where the ball went out and they start their drive on the 50. That's like, no, thank you. Kenny Newsel, how many 1-yard carries does it take to switch up the zone run game, or is this our curse? It's our curse. I can't promise you that I will never go on my zone running scheme rant this year, but I'm trying to save some oxygen. Bailey Turner says, more of a comment than anything, Petrus haters need to chill. It's almost like Iowa fans don't enjoy winning, and I liked how they responded. Did you see growth today? I did through the passing game. I did see some growth. Jake Van Ginkel, think Iowa's bad start was them looking ahead to Maryland? Seems they were looking past CSU a little. Maybe. That's a possibility. And how much better do you think the Iowa kids are going to feel tomorrow when they go look in the film room and take some heat from their coaches versus the Minnesota kids when they go into the film room and take some heat from their coaches and their loss? Minnesota had just beaten Colorado 30-0. Had my attention. Colorado had less than 100 yards. Colorado is the worst team in the state of Colorado. Maybe there's the mining school there in Golden. That's worse. But Iowa's kids are going to feel a little better because they're 4-0. Minnesota just lost to Bowling Green. Jacob Freeman, don't necessarily have a question. I just want you to talk about how good at football Jack Campbell is. Got to tell you, seeing Campbell and Benson and Jacobs out there, and Jacobs is what a great game for him too. Seeing those guys out there kind of reminded me of when Iowa had Ed Miles, Chad Greenway, and Abdul Hodge out there in 05. Jack Campbell has a chance to be the best big guy linebacker that Iowa's had. Abdul Hodge, Josie Jewell, Pat Anger. That's some pretty big company. Jack Campbell may be better than all of them. That's crazy to think. Going through questions here. James Meehan says, we seem to have regressed in our tune-up games. What do you believe is responsible for that, and what is your level of concern? Have they regressed? They haven't necessarily. They weren't necessarily world beaters offensively against Iowa State. What'd they have in the second half? Like 20-some yards? By the way, Taylor Martinez looks like he's back in the game for Nebraska. They didn't do much in the second half offensively against Iowa State. So I think they actually are getting better at some of the things that they want to try and do. But again, I'm not saying they're there. I'm not saying that they've arrived. They haven't arrived. They still have a long way to go. Thank you all so much for submitting these questions. There's so flipping many of them. This has to be a record. Joe Farrell, put me in the LeVar Woods to take over as head coach club, just like Phil Parker, fantastic coach. Also love downfield throws to you-know-who, by you-know-who. That's funny. LeVar Woods has done a fantastic job with Iowa special teams. Just a great, great job. No doubt about it. And he's a great dude, too, LeVar Woods is. Going through some questions here. Craig Bodie, I love this team, but my opinion of how good we are just plummeted. And that was after a paragraph ran about his disappointment in the day. Did you watch other teams play today? Did you watch Clemson play? Did you watch Texas A&M play? Did you watch I'm going to go back to the scoreboard here. You guys get the opportunity to see that. I want to go back and see if, did Auburn hold on? I mean, that's just the thing. We were all honed in and focused on Iowa today. And obviously we focused on Iowa because that's the team that we all like to watch. Kansas State's 25th in the country. They're down 21-10 right now in the second period against Oklahoma State. We go down here and see the games that are already over. Arkansas did beat Texas A&M. NC State beat Clemson. Number 18, Wisconsin's probably their fans are probably a little shaken. Iowa State now is 2-2 in the season that they thought that they might go to the college football playoff. Auburn did come back and beat Georgia State. So, I mean, it's relative. It's relative. Jason Miller, my brother, says death taxes, Iowa under. Yeah, he's right. Right about that. Roger Radloff says, thanks for the show after the game today. Where do you see our record at the end of the year? Concerned? Are we playing in the competition as always? I mean, my concerns today are no different than what they were before the game. I think the defense is top 5 in the nation level. Special teams, top 5 in the nation level. All the offense has to do is get to be average. And I think they took steps towards average today. Is that like the backhanded compliment of the year? The offense took steps towards being average today. There's a T-shirt for you, Ray Gunn. I think this team 10-2 probably feels about right to me. And 10-2 might not win the Big Ten West. If Wisconsin loses next week to Michigan, and then Iowa beats Wisconsin too, then yeah, 10-2 absolutely would do it. Still a lot to be determined. Brad Beverly says, I'd like to know what your thoughts were on the Apple television show Foundation. Love Foundation. Love the books. One of my all-time favorite sci-fi books. Don't want to get too long in this because many people aren't sci-fi fans. Listen, I get it. There's a lot of weird people in the world, and those of you that don't like sci-fi are weird. It's not faithful to the books, but I'm really excited. Something very entertaining. To me, it's like I enjoyed Game of Thrones, and that's an epic fantasy series, and I love epic fantasy. I read epic fantasy and sci-fi books exclusively. That's all I read. My wife and friends are like, hey, you want to read this book by this motivating speaker? I'm like, no, I don't have time. I want to escape to my world that I can go walk through mentally. But I'm looking forward to the Foundation. Really looking forward to seeing the Dune movie because the Dune series of books also loved reading those as a kid and then later in life. Tyler Anderson, Iowa's schedule is looking not quite as tough as it once did. Cyclones and Hoosiers losing does not help. Well, Iowa State's 2-2. Half of their losses are to Iowa. Indiana also has 2 losses. Half of their losses are to Iowa. Indiana's other losses to a top 10 team in Cincinnati. That's kind of the thing. Ross Christensen said, Colorado State should know you can't out Iowa. There's a lot of truth in that. Today was a phone booth fight. Colorado State wanted to play that. Iowa is, that's their side of the street. Jim Miller says, why did Taylor switch to a rugby-style punt instead of a traditional punt like he did the past 3 games? He did both in this game. You'll see oftentimes when there's a rush and he can tell when they're coming that he'll switch to or they'll call a rugby in some situations just to be safe. Refresh these questions here real quick, see if we have any more. Getting close to the end. Gene Gao says, all I can say is a lot of work to do, and you got to win the clunkers. Yes, you do. Okay, that'll do it. I think we've wrapped it up. Let me go to Twitter here real quick and go to the Iowa media list I have to see if there's any news that came out of the post game. Ooh, this is from Chip Scoggins, a sports columnist and writer for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. He says, this is as bad a loss as I can remember and as bad a coaching job as I can remember. This is totally on PJ Fleck. Ouch. I'm not a big PJ fan. Marc Morehouse tweeting, best quarterback in the Big Ten West, maybe. Looking around. It's not a good year for quarterbacks. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's really anything newsworthy coming out of the post game at this point in time. So that's always a good thing. No injury scares or anything like that. So, all right, folks, appreciate you all. Those of you that were here live, really appreciate that. Gosh, I went an hour and 10 minutes talking about I didn't talk by myself, but half of this was me reading your questions, which I really appreciate. It allows me to have a talk show format. Morehouse, we're still trying to get our schedules to hook up. Marc's got a job and he works on the weekends, and it makes it really difficult. So, I love Marc. We were texting last night. I sent him a note saying, hey, man, I'm going to do an impromptu out of nowhere podcast like at 10 o'clock. You want to jump on? But he was still working. So anyhow, Marc's always will be one of our favorites. So hopefully we'll find some time to check in along the way. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again later on.